several years into marriage, my husband Aaron came to me and confessed that he had a porn addiction that had led to an affair. And as you can imagine, it was absolutely devastated. It shook the foundation of everything I believed to be true about him, about our marriage, and even about myself. And it was also just such a thing that I didn't understand, because I had no context for Aaron, who I loved, being a person that would use pornography. It didn't make sense to me, because he was a good dad, he was a good husband, he went to church, he loved God. How could he get sucked into this? And so it catapulted both of us on the road to healing, but also for me, I began to learn everything I could about pornography, because I wanted to understand the why and the how. And it was part of my healing process. We healed together, but also each one of us healed on our own. And so that's really what led us to this point. It was a place of pain, but God has brought purpose to the pain.
Well, Greta, even your husband, Aaron, he's an artist, and he designed the cover of this book. And he's now also serving with you in various capacities to support people going through similar issues. You noted that this is going back many years ago, about 15 years ago. So you have 4 kids together. How old were your kids when Aaron came forward with this information?
They were 5 and under, so there are 3. Our 4th, Davey, he came later. But yeah, we had 3 kids, 5 and under. We were deep in the weeds of little kids and just the joy, but also the chaos of that. And so it was so much to deal with. It was a really hard time. I can look back now and we can speak with joy and hope and excitement about what God did, but in those early days, it was the most devastating thing we had ever walked through, I had ever walked through.
Well, indeed, it would be. And I think that there are people right now watching who have similar experiences, maybe their husband or wife who struggles with pornography addiction or looking at those kinds of things, maybe not leading to an affair, but still the reality, because it's so prevalent today. These images are everywhere. It's quite normalized in secular culture that this is a part of sexuality, and it's really not. It's deeply destructive, and we're going to get into that a bit more. But I have to ask you, I'm a mom of 2 boys, and they're 16 and 13, and I look back to the years when they were 5 and under, and the plethora of emotions I was going through, as a woman, and you've had children, and everything's changing in your body, and your outlook and your worldview is changing. And for you at that stage to find out this devastating news that your husband was looking at different, images that were so, different to what real world is. What was that like for your self-esteem and your worldview as a woman who was a young mom at the time, going through lots of changes?
It was really painful. I felt very alone. I think that was part of why it was so incredibly painful, because it just exacerbated the pain. Because it's pornography use and affair, those are things seeped in so much shame. And I was like, who do I talk to about this? I wanted to protect Aaron. He was repentant. He was willing to change. He was doing the work of healing and restoration. So we wanted to protect our story, our marriage, but also it felt so lonely. And then to me, to experience how it impacted me, that sort of felt like second place in terms of healing, because who do we need to help the most? The person who is struggling with addiction, right? And that's not misplaced. Aaron definitely needed help and support. But what I've learned in the years since, that the betrayed spouse also needs help and support. And that didn't come for me till later, but thankfully the Holy Spirit, he can step into that role of comforter, even if we are lonely and it is a hard time.
Yes, and Greta, were you able to reach out to anybody in the sense of a counselor or a pastor or anyone who actually came alongside you without judgment and just with deep care and could walk you through this?
Yes, specifically fellow women who I confessed, this is happening in our marriage, this is what's gone on. And that multiple times. There weren't a lot, but when I shared, I was amazed by them saying, I know exactly what you're talking about. And there was this then a sense of, oh, I'm not as alone as I feel I am. And there were a few pastors who stepped in and were helpful to us. But I also learned how ill-equipped much of the church is to deal with this problem, because it is so steeped in shame and secrecy, and we just want to hide it. It's uncomfortable, it's awkward, it's even frightening.
You know, when Aaron came to you with this information and was confessional and said, you know, these are the things that have happened, but I want this to change, right? Did you have a mix of emotions? Like, were you, I know she's laughing because I feel I would be very angry, also disappointed. I would also feel compassion. Like, you got drawn into this. This is a plant of the kingdom of darkness. This is the plant of Satan to try to destroy people's lives and marriages. And, you know, your spouse who loves you has fallen into this. What were your feelings? What were your feelings towards him?
Well, all the things. I mean, of course I was angry. Of course I was hurt, sad, scared. You know, there was a feeling of like panic, like, how do I keep this from happening again? Like, is he really going to change? But the thing that was so amazing was that compassion piece, because the more I learned about pornography addiction and the way pornography impacts the brain and, you know, the heart of the user, I had compassion for Aaron. Even though I was deeply hurt, the Lord gave me compassion to him to understand like the darkness that he had been sucked into. And that has grown to now have compassion to anybody I know who's dealing with pornography use or addiction, because I know the trauma, the sadness, the anxiety, depression, all those things that come from pornography use. And so I have like a care for not just Aaron, but really anybody who has walked through that.
Well, and you know, you've touched on something important, right? Our brains are wired a certain way, right? We have reward centers in our brains, you know, and that's connected to addiction. For the viewer watching right now who maybe is addicted themselves to pornography or knows someone they love who is, and they're sitting there saying, how can you have an addiction to this? You've done your research because you had to educate yourself on this issue, because you didn't understand going into what you experienced, what was happening for you and your husband. Can you unlock a bit of what goes on in our brain connected to things like pornography addiction? And what is that vicious cycle happening?
Yeah, well, with pornography use, there is a hit of the chemical dopamine, and dopamine is not something bad. Like, God created our body and our brain to use dopamine. It's a chemical that makes you feel good. And what happens though with pornography is it's like basically a giant dose of dopamine gets, you know, flooded through your body. And of course, then your brain, your reward center says, oh, I want more of that. That made me feel better when I was depressed or stressed or anxious or hurt, whatever it is, this feels good. And so then your brain and your body want more. And then what happens is more and more are released, and it becomes a very difficult thing to break that super dose of dopamine that is released in the brain and the body.
And it's like any addiction that releases dopamine. So you could look at substances, you could look at anything like pornography, any kind of addiction.
Even scrolling on, you know, TikTok or, you know, any social media or online shopping, you know, anything that numbs that pain that we're trying to avoid and to get away from for a short time. But because pornography involves not just that dopamine hit, it is a sexual element to that, that makes it even more of a powerful grip on the person who's using it. Because, you know, God designed sex to be an incredibly powerful connecting thing. In his design, it would be between, you know, spouses, but here it is taken out of his good plan, and it's still just as powerful, but just connecting to something that is not his best plan.
Well, I think that's an important comparison right there. And you touch on points like that in your book. It's time to talk to your kids about porn, but the way God has designed our sexuality versus the way the pornography industry has shown the world sexuality is to be. I think too the underbelly of the pornography industry is that there's a lot of human trafficking involved. There's a lot of substance abuse involved. It actually, of course, it's wreaking havoc on people.
Yeah.
Talk to us about God's design for sexuality, what that looks like. What is a healthy sexuality in a married couple's life?
Well, if you contrast it with pornography, pornography is all about objectification, which is you take this person that is, on an image on a screen, but they're a real life person behind the screen, and you objectify them. That means you turn them into an object for you to use for your own pleasure. When they're no longer serving you, they're tossed aside. And in God's plan for sex, it's real life connection between two humans that are really there, but it's not about self-service. It's not about objectifying this other person and using them. It's about serving them, and it's about a picture of God's love for us, right? Real intimate connection. Pornography has no connection. That's why it's such a lonely addiction, or even if a person's not addicted and they're just using it, it's incredibly lonely and isolating because there is no connection. It is actually taking everything God designed sex to be and warping it and twisting it into something that is self-centered and actually harmful.
And for your husband Aaron, and for many people, you mentioned how being involved in watching pornography and being addicted to it is connected to numbing out often.
Yeah.
So in your journey of healing in your marriage, were there some areas where Aaron needed to recognize, I don't just need to numb out here. I need to have deeper healing on this issue. And what did that healing journey look like for you as you guys moved out of the real trauma, actually, of what happened to you?
Well, we had to really learn how to connect, emotionally, and to really be honest about, the hard feelings that we want to just ignore and not talk about. Actually, have hard conversations. It's not an accident that my book is like we need to talk about this stuff. Because even though we had both grown up with, in a Christian home, we had this solid foundation of faith, we did not know how to talk about our sexual relationship in a healthy way. We did not know how to talk about the difficult feelings. I think we had reached a point in marriage where we were busy with kids and life and, Aaron's career, all of those things were making it hard for us to have the real, true connection that we needed. And so it was easier to just kind of go through the motions. And we had to learn to not do that and to really connect with one another. And I mean, it's been 15 years since this happened, and we're still learning that. I feel like we're still learning how to do that and choosing to.
That's a good word. And I think that's the journey of marriage.
Yeah.
And, there are many ways we can numb out. We can numb out through habits that are very destroying, like pornography, but also even just through food or through whatever, right?
Yeah.
Rom-coms, and then say, I'm not going to talk to my husband tonight. I'm just going to watch this. And so it's that numbing. What I really hear is this strain of you guys staying connected to God and you staying connected to each other.
Yeah.
And that's what pushes back against things like pornography and those kinds of issues in a marriage, which are so isolating.
Yeah.
And the goal is to rip everything apart, and that's the enemy's goal, using something like that. It's time to talk to your kids about porn. You mentioned that you and your husband came from Christian homes. So did you grow up hearing about, our sexual realities as humans made in the image of God and marriage? And was that an open environment where you could ask questions? Because this book is written to moms to equip them to have the conversations with their kids, not just about pornography, but, what it means to have a healthy Christian sexuality. What does that look like?
It was not very open. It wasn't like our parents shut us down, but it just... The church at the time, even the resources that were available, it was just, you just really didn't talk about it very much. And I think at the most it was don't have sex till you're married. And then when you get married, you'll have sex and it will be amazing because you waited. And I was like, that's not the whole story. And I think that was part of Aaron and I's issue, is that was the message we got. And then it was we got married and I was like, wait, this is not how you said it would be. This is harder. We need to talk about it, but we didn't know how. So our hope and prayer was always for our kids to give them better tools than what we were given, so that they would have a better chance.
Well, I'm so thrilled about this new book because I think you're giving families across North America and the world a better chance.
Yeah.
The reality is that, and stats show us this, that most kids under the age of 11 or 10, by that age, see pornography. And so I think, there are some misconceptions around this issue. We think it's not going to happen in our household.
Yeah.
We think our kids aren't going to go looking for it. And you unpack some of these misconceptions that actually they don't go looking for it. It comes to them. It's inevitable if they're anywhere on screens. Tell us a bit about these misconceptions.
Well, it's really important for parents to know that the pornography industry is actually really predatory. And it's not just the pornography industry. I would say all of, tech at large, because they want all of us to be consumers, right? Customers. So if you look at, at a certain kind of jewelry, then guess what's going to show up on your feed, right? That jewelry or other pieces of jewelry. They want you to be a consumer. Well, the pornography industry is the same. They want anyone to be a consumer of their product, the pornography that they're creating. And they don't care if it's an adult or a kid. And so they're going to push their agenda and their product at anybody who's on a screen. And so it could be something as simple as a Google search that your child does because they want to draw, a cute animal, and then suddenly they click on something and it takes them to something that they were not expecting to see, and suddenly they're exposed to pornography. And those are accidental things that could be really damaging for a kid who is not prepared with the tools to know how to respond when they accidentally are exposed to pornography.
Well, and I've even heard of things like algorithms that are watching if your child searches certain video games, and then they can tell your child is actually a male, and then they can tell the age, and they start to target them. And as a mom of 2 boys, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of how intentional and insidious this industry is in terms of getting the attention of our young people. I think some people worry about talking to their kids about pornography and what they're going to see online because they think, well, am I going to spike some curiosity in them? And maybe you haven't even had to talk about the birds and the bees with your kids yet, but you don't want them to start looking for this information. Or talk to us a little bit about how to mitigate that concern, because even I felt it. Yeah, tell us more. What
That's
you do.
probably the number one question parents ask
Okay.
me. So it's a big fear. And what I always remind parents is that our job as parents is to keep our kids safe. So you would not tell your kid to not cross the street without you, and deal with traffic because you're worried that they would try it. You would know the outcome, the potential danger that exists is more important than that they actually might try to do it because you brought it up, right? Like you need to keep them safe. They need to cross the street with you. So you say, don't cross the street without mom or dad. Well, pornography is another safety issue. It's different than crossing the street or touching a hot stove because it's 2025 and we're raising kids in a digital era. So this is a safety issue. We have to keep our kids safe from it. Is there a possibility your kid would be curious because you told them what pornography is? Yes, there is a possibility, but the potential danger of saying nothing is so much greater that's why we have to say something to them. And you can even say to your child, if you're curious, if you have questions about what I'm saying, I want you to talk to me. I want you to ask me. I am here for you to answer any questions you have. So to even kind of like circumvent that curiosity and to say, it's okay if you have questions, please talk to me about it. You have to make that move because we're raising kids in a digital era. They need a digital safety plan, and that's what talking to them about pornography is.
They really do need those open lines of communication and connection, and to feel safe, and to know you're not going to shame them if they have more questions or if they've stumbled on pornography. One of the things I love in your book is that there is a resource here. You give some sample scripts of how to speak to 6-year-olds and even teenagers. And I'm wanting to just have you give an example here because I want people to understand this book really is where the rubber meets the road. You really write it that way. So how do we speak to a 6-year-old or a teenager about potentially pornography? Give us some examples.
Okay, I love this.
Okay.
Because I think we do.
Yeah.
We need to know,
Yeah.
like, what does this really look like?
Yeah.
So if I was talking to you and you're 7 years old,
Okay.
you're my daughter, and I would say, sweetheart, I need to tell you about something called pornography. And it is not good for your body, your brain, or your heart. In fact, it's dangerous and it could hurt you. And it's my job to keep you safe. So I want to tell you what to do if you ever see it. First of all, you need to know pornography is pictures or movies of people who have no clothes on, can see every part of their body. And we know that we don't look at other people's bodies. They don't look at ours, their whole body, their private parts. And if you were ever to see pictures or movies like that with those kinds of images, here's what I want you to do. I would want you to turn the screen off, because you're going to see it on a screen. Like, it could be a tablet where you're playing a video game, or my phone while you're looking at movies while we're at the grocery store, or someone could show you on their phone or their computer. If that ever happens, here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn it off, turn it over, or walk away from that person. And then I want you to come find me or dad or grandma or grandpa, somebody safe, and I want you to say, I think I saw pornography, will you help me? And we will help you. That conversation is like 2 minutes long, and you've given them a definition, and you've given them actual steps of what to do, and you've given them the reassurance that you're there to talk to them about it. So that's for the younger kids.
Okay. Yeah.
Can we do the older
Very
kids?
good. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Because I've got the older kids.
So this
Thank
is
you.
where a lot of parents are like, well, it's too late. My kid's 15. How could I ever talk to them about pornography?
Right.
And this, I believe, is critical that as parents of teens and young adults, we don't miss out. And we can be really honest and say, hey, sweetheart, bud, I have missed an opportunity that is really important. I need to talk to you about pornography. And at that moment, your teen might be like, right? But if you could
Brace
say
yourself.
to them, I know that you've probably heard of it. Maybe you've seen it before. You've probably heard from other people what pornography is. But I want you to know what I believe about pornography. I want you to know that it's dangerous for you. And I want you to know what to do if you see it. If you've been looking at it, I want to give you an escape plan. I want to help you. So we're going to talk about it. And I am not here to make you feel bad. I'm here to help. Let's have this conversation. That kind of honesty with your teens is so valuable, because there are very few people in our culture that are telling teens pornography is not good for them. Mostly what they're hearing is everybody uses it, it's no big deal, it's fine. And they need to know the truth, and that who better to tell them than their parents.
And Greta, what I really hear in your conversations too is this lack of judgment, this lack of shaming, right? It's important not to do those things. And I think that connects to even a young person who might come to us and say, I've been looking at pornography, or I have seen it more than once, or sometimes I look at it. What would you say to the parent who might receive that information soon enough?
Yeah.
And how are they to respond to the young person, or even their spouse, whoever it might be that comes forward?
I will say that it feels different to hear that from a kid than a spouse, because there's a different level of betrayal, right? So it's going to hurt no matter what. Like, the reality is that is a painful confession for you to hear, or discovery from your child. So I think that's the first thing, is to acknowledge as a parent that's going to be painful. You might feel disappointed, you might feel mad, you'll certainly feel sad, scared. There's a lot of emotions that are going to be coursing through your body in that moment. And so to just take a minute, take a day to just let those feelings be there, take them to the Lord, ask Him, to carry those for you. You don't have to carry them alone. So that when you speak to your kid, you can come at them with the gentleness, compassion, grace, and inviting the Holy Spirit into that moment. And it is really hard because you feel all those other things, and maybe even your own trauma, if you've dealt with that in your own life. Chances are you probably have. But to be able to come to your child in that moment and say, I'm so sorry for what you've seen, that is probably filled you with some feelings of pain or confusion. Maybe you even feel like you want to go back to what you've seen, but you don't want to, so you feel like this struggle inside of you. I want you to know that I love you, I care about you, I want to help you step away from this thing that is not good for you. If that can be the foundation we lay for our kids in that moment of confession or discovery, it's a really powerful step for them to find healing and not be filled with shame.
And Greta, I think the backbone of so much of what you're saying there is the understanding that this is a spiritual issue.
Yes.
You know, you talk in this book about how pornography is a spiritual issue. It's an attack on people and society. Talk to us a bit about those spiritual layers so the person watching right now understands this is much deeper than just a habit. There is a spiritual realm plotting against us, and it is the enemy of our souls behind all of this.
Yes, because pornography destroys. It destroys God's plan for an individual because it attacks the way they view other people, the way they view themselves. But then it attacks families. So as a person comes together with a spouse, they get married, it attacks that relationship and children that come, and it can be generational, trauma. And so, yeah, it is a spiritual issue. And it pulls us away from God because we think in this place where we're at, engaging in activities where often you don't even want to be, but are having a hard time stepping away. How can God meet me here? How can He still love me while I'm doing this and living this life? That is a spiritual attack, and it's Satan telling you, oh, you're so filled with shame. God doesn't have space for you. He doesn't have room for you. How could He love you still? And that's not something I want for anyone, and certainly not as I think about my kids, your kids, and every kid of the parents who are watching, that I don't want them to grow up with that lie that is fed to them by Satan. Instead, I want them to know the truth is nothing can separate us from the love of God, right? Not even pornography.
Greta, such a good word, so important. And I really feel led right now, even in this moment, to ask you to pray for our viewers right now who are struggling with pornography, to pray for freedom over their lives. Would you do that?
Yeah. And can I say one thing?
Yes.
One of the things that's so important for parents to know, and for spouses to know, anyone dealing with this, you dealing with it in your own life, is pornography does not have to be the end of your story. Those patterns that are created in the brain while viewing porn, those can be rerouted and changed. Like the Bible talks about God renewing our minds. Yes. That is a spiritual thing, but it's even a physical thing. Our brains are neuroplastic. Changes can be made. Healing is achievable. And so I want us to hold on to that hope, yes, which is what I'll be praying for.
Oh, that's so good, Greta. And I mean, your life story, your experience, you and your husband, Aaron, today, you are advocates for helping people experience freedom from pornography. Your husband is in ministry doing this very same thing with people. And so, yes, the neuroplasticity of our brain to know that God has literally built us to overcome these kinds of issues. And with His power, anything is possible.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I love that you shared that, and it's just more hope in the heart. And if you'd pray for our viewers, Greta, for freedom, that would be amazing.
Lord, we come to you with so much hope, even though this feels like a dark place. I think about the words of Corrie ten Boom, who experienced life in a concentration camp, experiencing the darkest evils that could be imaginable. And she said, there's no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still. And I think that applies to this conversation, that we feel the weight of the darkness, but we know that your light is brighter. And the pit of pornography is not so deep that you can't pull someone out of it. And so, Lord, I just pray right now for anyone who is listening that they would know beyond a shadow of a doubt that their story is not over, that the child who has seen pornography, the teenager, the adult who's struggling, man or woman, that they know you are there, you love them, nothing can separate them from your love. Pull them out of this pit, Lord, and remind them that they are your precious children in your sight. We are so thankful for the hope of your light that shines brighter than any darkness that could ever be in this world. We love you, Lord. Amen.